think I am on. Hi, everybody. My name is Shannon. I am the author for The Door to Trilesk. It is the first in a planned series. You can also read it as a standalone. I also wanted to say that it is on sale through my website only at shannonholly.com. Put in SPFBOX. And you can get it for $2.99 instead of $4.99. I just wanted to put that out there. I want to give a quick synopsis of what the book is about so you kind of have an idea. 20-year-old artist Kate Jones, who is inexplicably drawn back to her estranged missing aunt's house, where memories of a forgotten magical childhood summer start to surface as soon as she steps foot onto the property. Seeking answers, she finds her aunt Esmeralda's hidden journal, and in between the pages, discovers her family has the ability to travel to other dimensions using doors only they can see, among other family secrets that I'm not telling you. When a powerful creature rips through the fabric in the sky above and threatens Kate, she is left shaken with the possibility her aunt may be alive, held captive in another dimension for information in the journal that could end all worlds, and Kate may be the key to saving her. But first, she must learn how to see those doors and harness the power she never knew she had. So I'm going to be starting on chapter 4. This is at the beginning of the Kate's experiences. She has not found the journal yet, and she's chalking up everything that she has been going through right now to just being in her head. She needs to paint some pieces. She is an artist for an art show coming up. And she's inspired in her missing estranged aunt's house. So she goes there with her best friend. She wants to show her best friend the house, and she wants to paint a piece for the art show. So with that, I'm going to read. Maggie's eyes took in the expanse of glass and the endless view of the gardens. It reminds me of an old English movie, one where the heroine gets killed, or was it the one where the house was haunted and everyone disappeared? Kate laughed. So you don't like it? I'm in love with it. I can't believe your mom grew up here and wants to sell it. Maggie twirled around to take it all in. I know, I don't get it. This house is amazing. I just feel so good in this room, like I can create a masterpiece given enough time, Kate said. And you shall, Maggie replied with confidence. Show me where the magic happens. Kate walked Maggie over to the art nook and beamed as Maggie oohed over the space in view. Any idea what you're going to paint? Kate pulled a fresh canvas from the pile against the wall and placed it onto the easel. No idea, she replied, already lost in ideas. Maggie turned toward the back garden. I think I'm going to explore a bit outside if that's okay. Some of those flowers I've never seen. Don't get lost out there. The gardens look like they go on for miles, Kate smiled at her friend. It was no secret Maggie loved flowers. Kate knew they inspired her to create, and Maggie would prefer to be alone with them and her imagination. I have an internal compass, remember? Maggie replied with a grin. Kate picked up a brush and was vaguely aware of Maggie as she headed out the back door. Hours later, she put her brush down and gazed at a portrait of Miss Walla, resplendent in all the colors of gray Kate could mix. Elated, she stepped back to view it from different angles when it dawned on her that Maggie never returned. She swished her brushes in the jar of clean water and wiped them off on a cloth before she stored them and slipped out onto the back patio. A moss-covered path beckoned, and she followed it, passing by her aunt's expansive herb garden filled with plants she recognized, the hibiscus, which shouldn't be blooming this early, and the lavender, but also exotic ones that didn't come from the local hardware store. Gigantic twisted flowers that swirled like ice cream cones and changed colors from bright to burnt orange as the sun touched its petals towered over her. Small, delicate bells, no higher than her ankles, beckoned to her with their lovely, dainty smell of fresh dreams. Kate jerked. What did fresh dreams even smell like? That sounded ridiculous to her, but none the same, that was exactly how the flowers smelled. Kate pushed on and followed the path through the cottage garden, thick with flowers haphazardly grown. Some vibrant, others pastel, yet the colors and chaos seemed to work in a cohesive feel. The path dipped around a cluster of tall trees like a gaggle of very old friends. She got the feeling she had interrupted their conversation, which was silly, but the silence as she walked past was unnatural. The path led her down a sloped hill and through an opening in a tall hedge fence that stretched in both directions until the path finally ended in front of a concrete water fountain. An orange sphere bobbed and turned on top, its brilliance undiminished by the water that spilled over its edges and down 2 tiers before it pooled into the bottom basin. Kate fought the urge to dip her toes in the water and instead turned her attention to the 5 paths that led away from the fountain. One felt familiar, so she chose it and followed it as it wove its way through a plot of massive magenta flowers on long spikes that resembled fluffy marshmallows. Kate reached out and marveled at the softness, drinking in their intoxicating fragrance, and became transfixed as a memory came loose. On this day, they had been playing hide and seek for hours and were headed back home. Her aunt lifted her up to smell the flowers. "Don't they smell heavenly, Kate? These traveled in the pockets of your I can't even begin to count, great-grandma to here." "Where did they travel from?" "I'm not sure, Bean." "How come you don't know?" "That information was lost years ago, and there's no one around to ask." "Well, if it's lost, you can find it. You're the best at finding things. You always find me when we play hide and seek." "That's because you giggle like a gaggle of kerfluckins." "You're silly, Aunt Esme, but you could find it if you just tried." "I wish it was that easy. I've tried, but sometimes things are just lost and there's no way to find them." Her aunt set little Kate down on the ground. Little Kate slipped her hand into her aunt's and looked up at her with wide eyes. "What if you couldn't find me?" "I would search for you forever and a day and look for you until my last breath," Aunt Esmeralda said, and little Kate knew she would. "I would search for you too, even if it took me till I was old, like 25. Aunt Esmeralda's peal of laughter filled the air as the vision cleared. Kate's throat constricted and she choked back tears. Life wasn't that simple. She wasn't 8 anymore, and the harsh realities of the real world had set in. There was no way she could look for her aunt now. Guilt washed over her as she thought back to when she first found out her aunt was missing. Her dad had told her about it, but couldn't give much information at the time. Afterwards, she had been so wrapped up in her own life, moving out, school, trying to get out from under her mom's thumb, that she barely asked her mom about it. Of course, her mom seemed reluctant to talk about it, which made it easier to ignore. Instead, she assumed the police would take care of it. Even if she wanted to start looking now, too much time had passed. Where would she even start? She was only one person and she had a job and a show to prepare for. Honestly, what could she do? She wasn't some detective protege who could waltz in and find her with 3 clues found on her old clothes. No, she needed to focus on the present to find Maggie. Lost in her inner turmoil, Kate turned a corner and almost smacked into a slumbering giant's head that blocked the path before her. Her feet stumbled back as she strained her neck up and took in the face towering over her. Soft, tall grasses covered its head and swayed in the breeze, giving it movement. Short, compact, fragrant white flowers created eyebrows, and dark green moss covered its face, its closed eyes, plump cheeks, and a partially submerged nose. Her fingers brushed the soft moss, and Kate wondered who had labored over this landscape masterpiece and why it was tucked away at the end of the path instead of being on display. It reminded her of the heads at the Lost Gardens of Helligan, only much larger. Not that Kate had ever been to see them in person. Her mother hated traveling anywhere. No, she had only seen images on a computer screen when she was younger, which was completely different than standing in front of one. If she closed her eyes, she could almost feel the earth rumble with its slumbering breath and expected its eyes to pop open as it lumbered out of the ground that held it in its embrace. "Halt! Who goes there?" A tiny voice broke Kate's reverie. Searching for the voice, she circled ahead. "Where are you?" Kate called out. "Down here. Open your eyes, you daft girl, and state your name and your business." "Oh." Kate looked down and beheld a tiny mouse, resplendent in a dark blue uniform. It held a tiny gold staff and stood guard inside an open doorway twice its size, carved into the back of the giant's head, partially obscured by the willowy grass fawns. Kate made out a colorful landscape behind the mouse and craned her look to look more closely when the mouse pounded the ground with a staff. "I said, state your name and business." "How are you talking?" Kate peered down at the mouse and looked for a way to explain its movement. Maybe it was a puppet or a lost pet, a young child perhaps that had dressed it up and lost it. And what? Taught it to talk? Or maybe mental health issues did run in her family like her mom always said. Or maybe the stress of it was just too much. Maybe this was all a hallucination. She seemed to be having her fair share of them in this house. Answer me or face the wrath of my staff. Kate burst into laughter at such a tiny threat. You dare laugh at me while I hold the staff of Anna Caffrey? The indignant mouse aimed its staff at a low-lying tree branch. Kate swore the air rippled in front of the limb, and seconds later the limb shattered. She ducked to protect herself from the flying wood shards. What did that poor tree ever do to you, Dasme? Another voice demanded. Kate gawked as the other mouse, dressed in puffy silk teal trousers, a silk yellow button-down shirt, and tiny socks and shoes that covered its tiny feet. The mouse called Dasme in the blue uniform stomped its tiny foot and turned its nose up in disdain. I had to, Flora. She's an intruder, and I had to protect our village. She would have gone her own way without even seeing you. Now you've gone and frightened the poor girl. Really. We were entrusted with the staff to protect our home, not this. How are you going to explain this to her next time she comes around? Flora sighed at the destruction of the tree. I'll tell her the girl was going to destroy our village, which she might have. You never know when the door gets stuck open what can come through, Dasme said. The only thing small enough to fit through the door is a squirrel, Flora argued. Kate closed her eyes, rubbed her temples, and rocked her upper body. This isn't happening. This isn't real. There were not talking mice. What's she doing, do you think? I knew she was deaf. Or deaf, maybe. If you can hear us, Dasme shouted. Stop it. She's not deaf or daft, are you, dear? Flora patted Kate's shoe. Kate reluctantly opened her eyes and peered down at the mice. They stared back with concern as Kate muttered to herself. It must be too much stress. Stress does crazy things to people. None of this is real. Animals do not talk, and they most certainly do not blow up trees. Either that or I'm having a breakdown, Kate said as she shook her head. What's a breakdown? Flora asked Kate. It's when there's a period of overwhelming mental stress. Kate stopped. Why am I explaining myself to a hallucination? You can't exist. The only rational explanation is that this is a hallucination brought on by stress. I mean, I guess I could have lost my mind, but I still feel sane. Although maybe people still feel sane when losing their minds. How would I know, though? I've never lost it before. Do you need help finding it? Dasme cocked his head at Kate. Finding what? Kate asked, distracted by her thoughts. Your mind. You said you lost it. Flora, I really think this girl is daft. Dasme turned towards Flora with his paws up. She's not daft. What's your name? Flora asked and put a paw on Dasme's mouth to stop the words that threatened to come out. Kate. Okay, that's a good start. Kate, what are you doing out here? I'm looking for a friend. Kate turned and looked around the path, but Maggie was still nowhere to be seen. Don't you have any? Why would you try to find one out here? Dasme asked, bemused as he pushed Flora's paw off his mouth. Let me handle this, Flora said with a stern look at Dasme and turned back to Kate. Did you both come from the big house? Kate nodded her head. Then you must know Esmeralda, Flora gushed. Kate nodded her head again slowly and asked Flora, do you know Esmeralda? Of course. We've known Esmeralda for years. She's the one that gave us the staff to protect our door. Kate sat down abruptly in front of the small open door. Have you seen her lately? Kate asked, not quite believing she was questioning talking mice about her missing aunt. I'm afraid not. Last time we saw her must have been about a year ago. Flora's paw stroked her chin. The same time she gave us the staff to guard our door that keeps getting stuck open. How long has it been stuck? Kate watched through the door as purple and green clouds floated by. Off and on for about a year. It used to happen only once in a while, but now it happens multiple times throughout the day, Dasme reluctantly said, still eyeing Kate. That's when Aunt Esmeralda went missing. Kate peered more closely at the opening. Can't you just close it? Don't you think we tried that? Dasme snapped. Pay him no mind, Kate. He's always grumpy. You of all people should know how doors work. What do you mean? Kate asked as her pulse quickened. Marco, girl, where are you? Kate stood up and spun towards Maggie's voice. Polo, I'm over here, and you won't believe what I found. Kate turned back towards the mice, but they were gone along with the door. There you are. I've been looking for you everywhere. Maggie stopped short at the look on Kate's face. What's wrong? Do you see any mice? Are you serious? You better not be playing with me. Maggie hopped from one foot to another as her eyes scoured the path for the rodents. No, not regular mice. These were... Kate paused. Special mice dressed in Renaissance clothes that talked? She sighed. Never mind. Let's go back to the house. I finished a painting and I think you'll like it. I know I will. I keep saying this place is good for you. Kate grimaced. That remained to be seen. Maggie studied the painting as Kate watched, a fingernail clamped between teeth. I love this one. It's fluid, like it'll just flow right off the canvas and puddle on the floor. How did you get so many shades of gray? It's spectacular, Kate. You can't deny your talent now, not with this piece. You are definitely going places, girl. Kate soaked in Maggie's words and beamed. I'm glad you love it as much as I do. Kate's stomach growled and she glanced at the clock on the table. We forgot to eat dinner. As if on cue, Mrs. B appeared in the doorway. Dinner's ready, girls. Kate looked at Maggie. It would be terribly rude not to eat since she took the trouble to cook for us. Terribly rude, Maggie replied. She hooked her arms through Kate's and dragged her off into the direction of the kitchen. They each took a seat around the kitchen table, beautifully set, with candles that glowed and created a warm ambiance. Mrs. B, I seem to remember you regaling Aunt Esmeralda and me with stories full of adventures. Or am I misremembering? No, you remembered correctly. Would you please tell us a story? Kate asked, wanting to take her mind off the events of the day. The candles flickered and cast a shadow over Mrs. B's light smile of assent. She began. The bee's knees held a different meaning for George and Harriet. In fact, it held a different meaning for most Ornabees. Kate and Maggie sat transfixed, lost in the words and worlds spun by Mrs. B. The kitchen table became a bubble of suspended time and reality, a haven from the stress and pressures of life while the outside world trudged on. Chapter 5. As much as I'd love to stay, I should get home and get some sleep. Maggie rose from the table. Thank you, Mrs. B. The story and food were amazing. Are you sure you don't need any help cleaning up? My pleasure, Maggie, and you can help clean up next time. You know you're always welcome here, and I always have lemon cookies stocked for people I like. Don't tempt me, Mrs. B. I already have a food baby that's feeling pretty heavy right now. Maggie rubbed her belly for emphasis and smiled. I'll grab my stuff, Kate replied as she stood up from the table. You stay here, Maggie instructed. I already scheduled an Uber, and they'll be here any minute. Stop, Maggie held up her hand at Kate's objections. Go and paint while you can, girl. I'll be sleeping by the time you get home, so I'll see you tomorrow. They walked to the front door. Are you sure, Mags? Kate asked. I am. I have to get to bed early tonight. Love you, girl, Maggie replied. Love you too, Kate said. Make sure you text me a picture of the driver, and when you get home, please, so I know you made it safe. Maggie smiled and reached for a hug, but Kate jerked her head back and peered down the dark hall. What is it? Maggie turned her head and looked behind her. Nothing. I thought I saw something, but it's probably my imagination. Kate shook her head. Another mouse, I suppose? Maggie laughed. A car honked from the driveway. Maggie hugged Kate, then opened the door and stepped through. She stopped on the top step and looked over her shoulder at Kate. Go, paint a masterpiece, and bounced down the steps into the waiting Uber. Kate closed the door with her back and stood up straight. Her eyes scoured the walls and willed it to move again. Minutes crept by and self-doubt started to eat at her when the creature scurried halfway up the wall from the shadows and stopped. It was small and pink, just the length of her hand, with 3 sets of elongated eyes, all staring at Kate, and 3 sets of thick legs that stomped up and down, first one side, then the other in excitement, reminding her of a puppy. Its small, round mouth chirped before it scampered down the hall. The creature stopped and waited while Kate's mind grappled with what to do. Should she follow the now blue-patterned chameleon who blended seamlessly with the wallpaper, or turn around and leave the house for good? After all, the hallucinations had started with the house. Maybe if she left, they would go away too. Except Kate wasn't too sure about that. It felt like life could never go back to the way it was before, and would she even want it to? Her mom's unwelcome voice invaded Kate's head. Kate, it's the house. It's feeding into your imagination. You've had issues with this in the past. None of this is real. It's impossible. Her mom's sharp voice faded as Aunt Esmeralda's voice tugged Kate into the past. Soon a memory took shape. The two lay on a blanket and gazed up at the night sky. Inky darkness settled over them like a blanket, a darkness you can only find outside the cities, devoid of light from street lamps, parking lots, businesses, and homes. The kind of darkness where you feel yourself fall upwards and get lost amongst the stars. And on this particular night, stars filled every inch of the night sky, each one more brilliant than the next, as if putting on a show for the humans below who were deep in conversation. Did you know that we're made up of stardust? Little Kate rolled her eyes at her aunt. How can dust come from the stars? You just told me the 7 sisters were 400 light years away, so how can their dust come all the way down here? Aunt Esme smiled. It happens when a very big star runs out of fuel and dies. It explodes, sending elements into space, which are seeds for new stars and planets like Earth. So Earth is made up of bits from a big star dying? In a way, yes. And humans are also made up of those elements as well. It just doesn't make sense to me, Aunt Esme. It seems impossible that we're made up of the same stuff no matter what you tell me. My precious Kate, there are things in the world that your mind will balk at. Things it will say are impossible, but never forget, impossible is just the limit of your imagination. If you were to go back in time 100 years and tell people there was a machine the size of your palm that could answer any question in the world, show you what a planet out in space looked like, or go on a virtual museum tour in another country, they would think you mad. Things we couldn't even comprehend 100 years ago are now commonplace, not even given a thought due to science, our imagination, and people willing to test the boundaries that constrained others. Can you imagine how different our world would look if inventors, explorers, artists, creators, or scientists would have let possibilities stop them? People on the edge of greatness aren't held back by impossibilities, Kate, and you shouldn't be either. The end. um, you're welcome. Thank you, Katherine, for having me. And I hope everybody liked it. If you have any questions,